Hello everyone, and welcome back to Whodunit, the place where we bring you the most chilling true crime cases. Today, we once again travel to Kingston upon Hull, England, to uncover the heartbreaking and deeply mysterious story of a beautiful 21-year-old young woman. So, let's take a closer look at what happened. Rachel Moran was born in 1982 in Ireland to her parents, Wanda and Ray. She had one brother named John. The Moran family was close-knit and deeply loving. They always wanted the very best for their children, raising them in a home filled with warmth, support, and encouragement. Her father lovingly called her the baby of the family.
She was the youngest in the family, and we were older parents. I mean, I was getting towards 40 when she was born. And yeah, we allowed her to indulge us in a way because it made you feel that you were still young.
Rachel was striking, standing just under 6 feet tall. She loved life and always saw the good in everyone she met. She studied entertainment and cabaret at Hull College. Although she was well known and sociable, she could be shy around people she didn't know well. She was affectionate, deeply family-oriented, and happiest when she was close to those she loved.
Even when her best friend went to work abroad, she was horrified at the thoughts of joining her because she never wanted to go away.
It was at Hull College, in 2001, that she met Mark Shepard. Their relationship blossomed quickly. The couple moved into a one-bedroom, first-floor flat in the Orchard Park area, a quiet suburb of Kingston upon Hull. Rachel was incredibly close to her family, and even after moving in with Mark, she lived less than a mile from her parents' home.
It was nice to know that when she finally did move out, she hadn't really moved that far. She was really only maybe 3/4 of a mile down the road.
Overall, Rachel was happy, and as 2002 was drawing to a close, she had big plans for the year ahead. She wanted new challenges.
She wanted to be a chef. That was the thing she was most keen at, and she was going to go back to college in the new year and take up catering.
In the weeks leading up to Christmas, Rachel and Mark adopted 2 kittens named Speedy Tomato and Batman. Rachel doted on them. To her, those kittens were an essential part of her life.
The kittens were like her children, and she was quite possessive and protective of them.
Tuesday, December 31st, 2002. Across the United Kingdom, people were preparing to celebrate the arrival of a new year. Rachel Moran, 21 years old, was no exception. She went out with her brother John to enjoy the evening and celebrate at a local pub.
I was just delighted that she was going out with him. I wanted the two of them to do something together, and I thought a girl of 21 should be going out and enjoying herself.
Rachel had a good night. She'd enjoyed herself. She'd made some new friends. Midnight came and went, much like any other sort of New Year. They had the countdown, sang Auld Lang Syne, and we stayed in the pub perhaps for another hour after that.
Rachel planned to stay the night at her parents' house on Hall Road. After a fun evening that included a few drinks, Rachel and John returned home.
It was only about 1:15, and I was still up reading when they both came home. John went upstairs immediately because he'd had a good few drinks and he was really jolly and happy, and he got himself ready for bed.
Rachel stayed up to chat with her mom.
I asked Rachel, was she going to ring Mark up and wish him a happy new year?
Rachel agreed. Mark was supposed to be at the flat he shared with Rachel, looking after their kittens. But when Rachel called the flat, Mark didn't answer. So she tried his cell phone.
It was answered by a mutual friend of theirs, and Rachel could hear a party going on. As it happens, after Rachel had left on the afternoon to come here, these friends had phoned Mark and told him that they were having a party in the house, asked would he like to come.
Rachel was upset.
I think she was upset and frustrated, mainly about the cats, but partly because she couldn't have a proper conversation because his mobile ran out of money, and there was no way she could speak to him after that.
Angry and worried about the kittens, Rachel made a decision. When she left the room, Wanda assumed she was heading to bed.
I just thought she was getting ready for bed.
But a few minutes later, Rachel reappeared, changed her shoes, and walked toward the front doors.
And she came down, and when she got to the door, I heard her say, "Bye then, Mum." And so obviously I shot up and said, "Where are you going?" And she said she was going home.
Rachel said she was going back to the flat to check on the kittens. Wanda stepped outside with her daughter.
It was really, really cold, and windy and rainy, and I said to her, you can't go home at this time. You don't normally walk home on your own. And she said, I have to go because there's no one there and the kittens are alone.
Because it was New Year's Eve, taxis were scarce. Wanda was deeply concerned and begged Rachel to stay.
And she sort of got a little bit exasperated with me, I think it was.
As they stood outside talking, a man walked past them. Wanda was so worried that she almost called out to him, asking if he would walk with Rachel to make sure she was safe. But she didn't. Despite her mother's protests, Rachel decided to walk the mile back to her flat.
I had just gone as far as I could with excuses and reasons, and there was nothing else I could say. And even as she was walking several yards ahead, I still shouted, ring me as soon as you get home, and she turned round and said, yeah. She said she would.
30 minutes passed. No call. Wanda repeatedly tried Rachel's cell phone.
I tried her mobile and it just kept ringing and ringing and ringing and cut out. So I tried ringing her house and there was no reply. And then I tried again about 10 minutes later, and I tried quite a lot of times then. The only thing I did think was she might have decided to go out walking and looking for Mark. In which case, I did know then that she wouldn't answer the phone because she'd expect me to say, why aren't you at home?
But time kept passing. 2 hours went by. Still no word. Exhausted, Wanda eventually went to bed, hoping morning would bring answers.
I just saw no point in staying up, and I knew that I had to go to bed at some stage.
When daylight came, the phone rang.
The phone woke me up and I ran downstairs thinking it was Rachel, and I was totally relieved, and instead it was our other daughter Vanda just ringing to say Happy New Year.
Now Wanda had to explain to her husband Ray and their son John what had happened the night before.
She told me very shortly after I got up that Rachel had gone home the night before and that she had tried to call her to make sure she got home all right, and she couldn't get through to her. At that point, I tried to call her house phone and her mobile phone and couldn't get through to either.
By that morning, her mobile just said, we are unable to connect you.
John tried calling Rachel's cell phone. Nothing. Then he called the flat. This time, there was a small flicker of hope the line was engaged. That meant someone was using the phone.
And John said there's someone there because the landline is engaged. So I tried about 5 minutes later and Mark answered the phone. And I just, oh God, I was so relieved. And I said, oh Mark, is Rachel there? And he said immediately, well no, she's not here. She was staying with you last night, wasn't she?
Mark explained that he had been out all night at the party and had returned to the flat at around 7 o'clock that morning, going straight to bed.
As far as he was concerned, he was the last person to leave the flat the night before, and it was exactly as he'd left it.
The cats hadn't been fed, there was no food for them, but they were hungry. So she's not been here.
There was no sign Rachel had been there at all.
And so, of course, I just was totally horrified then.
There was no sign that she'd been there to get changed, and she hadn't slept there.
Wanda and John immediately went to the flat themselves. Mark was right. Rachel had not returned. This was completely out of character for her.
I had no idea what must have happened. But of course my mind was imagining all kinds of scenarios.
Wanda knew something was terribly wrong. Mark tried to reassure her, saying Rachel knew lots of people and might have gone to someone else's house.
I said, I'm going to go to the police. It was only lunchtime, she hadn't even been gone 12 hours. And Mark was quite bemused, he thought. He said she could be anywhere, she knows lots and lots of people. But I was just worried because it was just totally out of character.
Wanda and John went straight to Priory Police Station to report Rachel missing. Detective Superintendent Paul Davidson led the investigation. The first question investigators had to ask was about the circumstances. Was this something Rachel would normally do? Had she ever disappeared like this before? The answer was no. Trevor Watts, a homicide officer, said it was clear something serious had happened.
This was completely out of character. For her not to get in touch with somebody, not to say where she was, and for her to disappear like this, it was clear that something was very seriously wrong.
Police acted quickly.
You cannot assume anything. So what you have to do is look at, well, what could have happened to Rachel? And there are scenarios, obvious ones. She could have had somebody else in another part of the country and was looking for a second life somewhere. She could be murdered. She could be lying in a ditch somewhere, having had an accident. The complexities of what you're dealing with are immense, really.
Detectives from Humberside Police launched a full-scale missing person investigation. More than 40 officers were assigned to the initial inquiry.
When you start looking at a missing person case, you look at the people she's closest to. And on this case, she was with her brother on the night time, and she'd gone back to her parents' address. So it was a brother, a mother, a father, and a boyfriend. And you look for where she could be, where she's likely to be.
Detectives also requested detailed witness statements from Rachel's family to better understand her character and habits. Wander later told police,
And I said, your father will kill me if he knows I've let you walk home on your own. And I said, I can't even put you in the car because I've had a couple of drinks. She said, it doesn't matter because I'm all right.
We're looking for just a fine detail, just to get an idea of where she possibly may be, or find a link that can progress the investigation on.
Wander also mentioned a potential witness, the man who had walked past them on the street that night.
It was either fair or his head was shaved. And he was wearing a shirt in a similar colour to the blue one you're wearing today.
While detectives worked to identify the man who had passed Rachel and her mother on the street, officers were also interviewing Mark, Rachel's boyfriend.
I don't remember her talking to her.
You don't remember talking to her at all?
We went through the finances, we went through their history together, and built up as full a picture as we could of exactly what they were like as a couple. We knew that they'd had an argument, and we needed to make sure that we found out exactly if he had any involvement in Rachel's disappearance.
Detective Superintendent Paul Davidson later said that Mark did not appear overly worried or distressed, something investigators found unusual.
But he didn't seem at all worried or upset, which is in complete contrast to Wanda, Ray and John. Bearing in mind, they'd lived together for a long time and apparently in love and all the rest of it, so it just didn't seem right.
Mark told police,
She wasn't having none of it, so I ended up going to my friend's house and because she didn't want to come. I got a bit upset with her.
They'd had an argument that evening, and that's the reason why Rachel stormed off, very much against the mother's will. And I guess to Wanda, this was caused by the fact that Mark didn't do what he was supposed to do. If you look at it from that perspective, they wanted to know, had Mark something to do with Rachel's disappearance? I've got to say that he did nothing out of the ordinary, no unusual behaviour, just went to his daily life, went to see his mother, so there's nothing at all which caused me concern.
Mark was placed under surveillance, and his alibi was examined in detail, but the monitoring revealed nothing suspicious. He behaved normally, his alibi checked out. There was no evidence linking him to Rachel's disappearance. That meant police were not only back at square one, they were now facing their worst fear.
Once we'd discounted Mark, there was just absolutely nothing at all that we had any serious leads on. So literally, we just had no idea what happened to Rachel.
Mark was at a party till it was about 6 a.m. on Bransholme in Hull. There was lots of people at the party. We saw all the people that were there, and his account checked out. And there was nothing that made us believe that he was responsible for the disappearance of Rachel.
Rachel may have come to harm at the hands of a stranger. Stranger abductions are thankfully rare, but it was a possibility they could not ignore. Rachel's bank accounts showed no withdrawals. Her cell phone had made no calls and sent no messages. No clothing was missing from her flat.
I wish the final conclusion could have been, yes, she's run away and she doesn't want to see any of us again. Because then, okay, well, we know what's happened, we know she's all right, but unfortunately we're not going to see her again. That would have been all right, but just not knowing what had happened would have been intolerable, really.
Investigators turned their attention to CCTV cameras in the area, and this time, they found something.
It was decided to gather all the CCTV within a 6-mile radius, and that included all council CCTV, any shop CCTV, and any CCTV that people had in their own homes. So we had to gather that quickly. That was one of the urgent things we had to do.
We managed to recover some CCTV footage of Rachel passing a place called Jackson's, which is actually on Hall Road, which gave us the time when she would have been there and which direction she was travelling in.
This not only provided a precise timestamp of her movements that night, it also showed the direction she was heading. significantly narrowing the search area. Now, every available resource was deployed. Police helicopters scanned from above. Search dogs and their handlers combed through the area. Mounted officers joined the operation. The Humberside Police diving unit was brought in.
And the search, I have to say, was massive on a scale that I've not done before. Pretty much the whole of the resources available, which would be the helicopter, dogs, horses, underwater search, we utilised pretty much non-stop from the beginning. And again, it was going outwards from our last sighting, really, which was the closed-circuit television image of Rachel.
For Rachel's family, the scale of the search was devastating. It confirmed just how serious this had become.
When the police divers were dragging the rivers and cameras were there, I made a conscious effort never to watch the television, but Ray always did. And he got himself really upset. But I was detached from it. I just didn't want to think about it at all.
Media coverage intensified. Public appeals for information were broadcast repeatedly. In those appeals, Rachel was described as more like a teenage girl than a woman in her 20s. As her family pleaded desperately for news, the search continued. Saturday, January 11th, 2003, divers began searching Bomston Drain, a canal often used as a dumping ground for rubbish.
We went over this area several times, basically skimming the top of the surface, removing items, going over it again, digging a little bit deeper so not to disturb too much.
Within hours of arriving, they recovered their first significant piece of evidence.
A shoe was found, which was of a similar make and style to what was reported Rachel had been wearing, which was obviously of interest to the inquiry.
Divers continued their painstaking work, removing layer after layer of debris, examining everything carefully. The following day, the canal revealed something even more shocking. A woman's handbag, concealed inside a discarded trash bag, was recovered from the water. It was carefully brought up and examined.
The bag was fetched out of the water, brought onto the bank, and very carefully, wearing protective gloves that had been opened up, and had a look inside it.
Inside were various items: a cell phone, cosmetics, hair clips, and one item that confirmed the owner beyond doubt: an Irish passport belonging to Rachel Moran.
Enclosed within the bag was a passport, which had obviously got photograph, signature and details which referred directly to Rachel. Some other items you could turn around and say, well, it's possible it was, it's possible it wasn't Rachel's. A passport basically clinches it.
It looked to us that this had been dumped by somebody. It was in a bin liner. I think it was meant not to be found. So it was the first positive lead we'd got about the disappearance of Rachel. What I then expected to happen would be to find Rachel's body in the drain.
The possessions were wrapped in a black bin bag, and it told us that somebody had deliberately got rid of the property that Rachel had on her at the time, and it did give a far more sinister feel to the investigation.
I didn't think for a second that anyone had thrown her in the water, but I just thought she must have been so distressed that night and overwrought that she'd gone to the drain and fallen in it. Not necessarily thrown herself in, but slipped in the dark, and I just felt totally guilty that maybe I could have done something to stop her doing that, forced her back in the house.
The handbag and its contents had clearly been deliberately discarded. This was no accident. By now, it was becoming increasingly clear. This was likely a case of foul play.
And at that point, we thought that Rachel was probably dead. The next question is, where was she? And that was the difficulty, really. We hadn't found Rachel in the drain. We'd searched open land, burial sites, and again, it didn't really move as much further on into finding out what happened to Rachel.
As detectives continued trying to trace any potential witnesses who might have seen Rachel leave her mother's house that night, Detective Superintendent Davidson arranged a reconstruction to jog memories. A female officer resembling Rachel wore similar clothing and walked the exact route Rachel had taken. They hoped someone might remember seeing her, or something unusual. Several people did come forward.
We did have a police officer who had a resemblance to Rachel. She was wearing the same clothing, walking along the same route, to try and get someone to jog the memory, to see if they'd seen anything or if they'd seen Rachel on that night.
But it had been New Year's Eve. Alcohol had blurred many memories.
We did get an excellent response, but it was New Year's Eve into New Year's Day, and some people had had a drink. The recollection wasn't as accurate on some occasions as it could have been.
However, the reconstruction led to another breakthrough. Police obtained additional CCTV footage from a nearby school. The quality was poor, but in the upper left corner of the screen, a faint figure could be seen. Officers believed it could be Rachel.
It was one Friday afternoon where a detective going through footage from CCTV asked me to come and look at an image on the screen. And he showed me this image on the screen, which was very difficult to see and understand what you're looking at. And he said, well, I think it's a female, and you could see light, which would be the head, then dark, then light. And he said, that's the head, that's the dress, and that's the legs. And I said, do you think that's Rachel? And he said, yes.
If it was her, she had been less than 500 feet from the safety of her flat.
That raised my hopes that that could have been Rachel at that time, which meant significantly that she got to a certain point on Hall Road and may have gone a slightly different route home. The route that we anticipated she would have taken was brightly lit. However, the route she took led her into darkness and, from a female's perspective, put her in a much more vulnerable position.
It also suggested she had taken a different route than originally assumed. Investigators had believed she walked along a well-lit path, but this footage indicated she may have chosen a much darker route. As detectives replayed the footage, they noticed something else. Another figure, running up behind her.
Following Rachel, there appeared to be another figure. Very difficult to tell, again, whether it's male or female. But the gap between the two wasn't very great. If Rachel had been murdered, that was possible a person that could have been involved.
If Rachel vanished near this location, perhaps this person was responsible. Detective Superintendent Davidson began to consider a chilling possibility. If Rachel had been taken by a complete stranger,
the likelihood is that, she's got to that point and disappeared. It could be a stranger abduction. And there aren't many in this country in any one year, very few, 2 or 3.
Humberside Police were facing an entirely new and formidable challenge.
If you're going to capture a stranger, a true stranger who's killed Rachel, then they are going to do everything possible, to evade detection.
The new CCTV discovery reinvigorated the investigation and gave senior officers a bold new idea, as Officer Trevor Watser explained.
That if a person is abducted on foot, 98% of the bodies are found within a half-mile radius of the last sighting, and 99% are found within a mile of the last sighting.
Based on that information, I made a decision to search all of those houses within a 1.5 mile radius, which means basically knocking on somebody's house and asking to come and search the house from top to bottom, including fridge, freezers, lofts, everything.
The operation would require more than 100 officers. It would depend entirely on the cooperation of residents in Orchard Park.
The best I'd hoped for when I made that decision was that if she was in a garage or a car or a house, by going high profile in the media that I'm going to do this, that we would have Rachel's body dumped somewhere.
It became the largest search ever undertaken by Humberside Police. It was a massive gamble. The time and manpower required to thoroughly search every property were enormous. But if there was even the slightest chance of finding Rachel, they had to take it. If the operation failed, Detective Superintendent Davidson risked wasting thousands of pounds in public funds.
It was a difficult concept for people to get their head around, particularly the officers who worked for me, and it was a decision which most people didn't agree with, because this would commit hundreds of officers every day to searching by consent.
Despite concerns raised by some officers, on January 28, 2003, the search officially began.
We assembled, I think, 100 officers, and I did the briefing, explained what I was going to do. And I've got to say that most people looked at me and thought, it's time they carted this guy off, really, because he's balmy. It was pouring down with rain, freezing cold. We knocked on the first door and a little old lady came. Then we asked to come in, and with the cameras rolling, she swore at us and slammed the door. And at that point my heart sank, because looking at what was happening in other streets, people were not answering the doors. And I thought, what have I done? This is the worst decision I've ever made in my life, really.
Each team consisted of 3 people, 1 search specialist and 2 police officers. To raise awareness and explain the purpose of the operation, Davidson invited television crews to film the initial searches. As more and more homes were cleared, Paul Davidson received an unexpected phone call. The caller was a police officer. His voice was shaking, emotional. He had important news, and what he was about to report would change everything.